Okay, we're going to do some wedding photography excitement. I'm going to go down here to Demo 4, Wedding Couple PSD, which is not a raw file, so it opens right up in Photoshop. Here they are. Look at them. So happy. I'm going to go ahead now and dock properties back in there, go back here to layers, and make me a black and white adjustment layer. Oh my gosh, look how classy that is. That is just like, that's fine. I'm not going to mess around with any of the whatever, tone things, right? Not going to do that. Those are all terrible ideas. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it here in a standard black and white. And what I want to do, right, I want to make the big money. I want to do a cheesy trick and have the colors be, or the flowers be in color and the rest of the picture in black and white, and then charge them $5,000. So the way that we do that is by using a layer mask. Now, I mentioned these a little bit last week when I was telling people not to use them for compositing, but they are really just fantastic. They're a way of showing or hiding part of a layer. We're going to use them here on this adjustment layer to show and hide our black and white adjustment. So where we use the mask to hide the black and white adjustment, right, you won't see the adjustment, you'll see what's underneath, which will be the image in color. Where we show that black and white adjustment layer, you'll be looking through that black and white adjustment layer to the underlying image, and it will be black and white, right? So that's what we use the mask for, is for hiding and showing the effect of our adjustment layer. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this. All right, I'm going to go ahead and rename this original and duplicate that layer, main, hide the original underneath the main layer, turn off the original, come back up here to my overall black and white. So the overall black and white layer, right, by default, it's showing across the whole picture, right? I make a black and white layer, everything's black and white. That's what we expect. That's the way that it works. But it's doing that even though it does automatically make a mask. It just makes a mask that is set to show it across the whole thing. What are you talking about? Okay, well, let's look here at our black and white adjustment layer. Here is this white rectangle. That is a thumbnail image of our mask. Now, wherever there is white paint put down, that means that our black and white layer is present, is showing, is like impacting our image. Wherever there might be black paint, our black and white layer is hidden. By default, every adjustment layer comes ready-made with a mask that is just full of white paint. So you can see that here in the thumbnail, big white thumbnail. That's great. Let's take a look at what it looks like when we throw some black paint in there. So I'm going to grab my brush, B on the keyboard. Right, I'm going to look at it here to see how big I would like it to be. Maybe I'll make it a little bit smaller. That looks like it's 40 pixels. I'm going to come up here, opacity and flow. My flow is 1%. That seems a little low. Let's pull that up to 100 for the moment. And I'm going to come down here to where I know the flowers are. And I would like to do a little bit of painting on to hide my black and white layer. So if I want to hide it, I'm using black paint. I can make sure I have black paint by hitting D for default. Right? Default means black foreground, white background. Right? If I hit X back and forth, it would go back and forth across those things. And oh, that's a funny thing. On a layer mask, the default is actually white. My apologies. It is black in the main pixel image. I'm going to let you in on a secret. I didn't actually know that until just now, even though I've been using this stupid program for whatever, 20 years. I just knew that I was always like screwing up and having to hit X to flip it back and forth until I got black paint up there. So I'm here on my layer mask, right? I can tell because I have clicked on it. Right, I'm clicking on that layer mask thumbnail. It has that little box around it. That means it's active. If I click on this part, now that has a box, and if I try to do anything, I can't. I have that little universal no symbol. Come back here, click on this. Make sure I have black paint. So apparently that's hitting D for default, and then X for swap, foreground and background. I'm just looking down here to see, do I have black paint? Yes, I do. And let's do a little painting over here on this boutonniere he's got there. Holy smokes. So you can see in that teeny tiny thumbnail there's a little bit of a black area, and you can see here on his jacket that that boutonniere is now in color. If I swap my paint colors, again I just hit X, I can make it go back to black and white, back to color. All right, let's go ahead and try and get these guys down here also into color. Make my brush a little bit bigger. Wow, look at that. That is amazing. So things to think about as we did this, right? One, it's a lot easier to not worry about being sloppy when whatever's behind the thing you're working on is a solid black, right? Like, oh, I made the black in color. It's already black, right? Like there is no in color. So the fact that I was super sloppy on there doesn't really show up, doesn't really matter. That's not the case down here where, right, like I had a little bit of slop and now I'm getting some skin tone. If I come over here, right, if I get a little slop, I'm going to get dress in there. So one of the great things with a wedding, if they're wearing black and white, is that doing something like this is a lot easier. You need to be a lot more careful where you have areas where there is something that you want to be in color right next to something that has color, but you would like to stay black and white. So ways we can get around this, right? We can make our X to swap it, cursor smaller. Right, and I'm using my Wacom tablet because I find it easier to scribble around there. We can look at how hard of a brush edge we have. So if I had something where my brush edge was very soft, I might find it either a little bit easier or a little bit harder to get a smooth boundary on there. A lot of the time, if I want a hard boundary, I probably want a hard brush. So here I've set it to be soft. Excuse me, goodness gracious. Not great. I'll go ahead, pardon me, and set the hardness back up again. Same thing with opacity and flow. Here we want it to either be black or white, so we don't want it to fade in and be a little bit black and white and a little bit color. We want it to be one or the other. So that's great. Oops. Get that. Okay. So that's how it works, right? If I look at that little preview up here, you can see there's a little bit of black in there. Everywhere that is black, the effect of my black and white mask is hidden, and it's going to show up in color. Now, a couple of things that you need to pay attention to. Excuse me. A, when you're working on a file that isn't, a neutral color behind what you're doing, it's going to be a bigger deal. B, be aware that you can do this to any adjustment layer. Right? Next week we're going to get into doing it with curves, which will be really powerful. But once you start doing this, the other thing that's really important is that you need to check your brushwork. Looking at this, I'm like, oh yeah, man, it looks great. Like I clearly just colored right up to the edge and did an amazing job, and I'm a genius. If I actually look where my brushwork is, you can tell that I did not do that. And this means that you are opening yourself up for your screw-ups being noticed down the line when you print it bigger, when you look at it closer, when you have a little bit more sleep and look at it on a bigger monitor, like all of these things. So ways that we can check your brushwork, ways that you should check your brushwork, because I'm going to check it and I'm going to take points off if it's screwy. So if I hit the slash key on the keyboard, that is the slash that is directly above the return key, it's going to show me the channel that is my mask. What does that mean? Okay, if I go here to channels, right, or I could go to it up here under window, and if this wasn't checked, hit channels, pops up there it is, RGB, red, green, and blue, and then right down there, because I have this adjustment layer selected, right, if I don't have it selected, it's not there, I also have the mask for my adjustment layer. You can go find it, but you can also just hit the slash key and it's going to be great. That's going to show me my brushwork in sort of starkish red terms. And I can see that, oh yeah, this is really just sloppy as all get out. So I could come in here again with the brush and really just sort of erase some of that. I could also, right, be like, oh, you know, I should really have done this with a softer edge, right? Here, where I don't need to worry as much about that abrupt transition because I'm working with something black behind it. Let me go ahead and, oops, delete that, right? We're working on this adjustment layer. We can just select something and delete it. If you do what I do, which is you delete it to the background color, and that's black, just hit X so the background color is white, and delete it again. Command D, deselect. All right, so if I go back here, grab my brush, I'm going to make my hardness very low, and come in here with brush. There we go. And that's going to mean that if my edge is a little sloppy, if it's a little sloppy and it's also fairly fuzzy, that means that the transition is still not going to be quite as abrupt, and so visually it's still going to be a little bit harder to see. If I have something that is a line, right, here, let's make this hard edged again, bigger, right, if I have something that has this very distinct abrupt transition from being black and white to not being black and white, even if it's somewhere here where there isn't a lot of color, you're going to be more likely to be able to see that. When you have a softer brush, even at that edge, there's going to be a little bit of a gradual transition, right? Because it's going to be sort of fuzzy, shifting from one to the other. So generally speaking, having a little bit of fuzzy on there is going to be good, except where it's something like here, where I do have something that has a distinct color behind it, and I really need to be precise about what I'm doing. So this looking at the channel is one way to be able to view and visualize your mask. The other way to do it, and this I find a little bit easier at times, right? You'll see that that mask was in red, right? Now I could double click on it and I could, you know, change the color, right? Say if I had something where there was a lot of red in the image already, I could change the opacity, right? I could make it 100%, I'm like, okay, well now I can, really see it a lot more easily, but I can't see what's underneath it. But if I have something where, I'm doing a lot of masking over a big area, the color is a little bit variable. There are times where I would like to see my mask in really stark terms, usually because I'm looking to try and see, is my brushwork kind of bumpy? Do I have a hole in the middle of it that I missed? And to do that, I'm going to come back up here to my layer mask, hold down the Option key and click on it. And that's going to give me my mask in solid black and white. Here, right, I don't know that this is that much better than it was just with the channel. But a lot of the times, if I'm doing something that's much more subtle, I'll have a little area in the middle where it's just not quite all the way solid. I was brushing something in gradually, and these areas are all kind of like dark tones, dark grays, but not 100% black. And I can see that here in a way that I can't with that 50% of the red in the channel. So, things you need to know how to do. You need to be able to see it in black and white. That's by holding down the Option key and clicking on that layer mask. You need to be able to see it as a channel, which is by hitting that slash button on the keyboard. And you need to be able to be conscious about what your brush looks like, size, hardness, as you're going in and starting to do that masking, so that you can get the most effective sort of masking out of the area where you don't want your black and white to kick in. So I think that is it on there. You can go through the handout, take a look at that again. One thing I will point out, just because it happens to me all the time, so I'm sure it will happen to you, if I'm in here and I'm, masking away, oops, can't use tablet, not on the tablet. All right, so I'm masking, and I'm like, okay, come back here, all right, let's do some masking, and I'm like, whoa, what happened? Very often, I will find myself accidentally starting to mask stuff in on the actual pixel layers. Now, with what we're doing this week, that should be super obvious, right? If I'm like, whoa, right? Like, oh yeah, that looks like a screw up. I'm going to come back up here and make sure I click on that layer mask thumbnail and do whatever it is I need to do in there. Next week, when we're working with much subtler brushwork, it's going to be harder to notice. So get in the habit now of trying to pay attention to what is active, i.e. which has the little rectangle around it, right? Now it's that pixel layer, now it's that adjustment layer mask. And if you do find yourself with, instead of a black and white adjustment, actual black or white, know what to do, right? Command Z, go up to history, undo it. Worst case scenario, you can always throw that layer away, go back to the original one, right? Reduplicate it so you still have a copy. But yeah, that's it. Now we've made this beautiful image, and we can charge them $5,000. Good job. Make some money.